Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Remember to subscribe to the show, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe and follow if you hate the Blues. Today, I'm joined by AVFC London Lions co-chair Paul Webb. Good to have you back, Webbo.
How you doing, Frankie? Good to be back.
Not bad at all, thank you. Now, in this show, we're repeating a fun feature about the upcoming season. We did this last year as well. It's extremely early days, but we're going to predict the final Premier League table for the 2024-25 season. And we'll also look back at last year and see how just right and more so wrong we were with last season's predictions. Last year, Webbo, I did say the challenge was whoever gets the most wrong has to buy the winner a Nando's. I'll say this, Webbo. So hopefully, same again this year. And I've listened to last year's, and I tell you what, I'm looking at that Nando's menu and I'm licking my lips. But Webber, I think firstly, before we get into that, we'll just talk a little bit about Aston Villa. There's been, some big news in the last week. Obviously, Unai Emery's contract, the big links to Ross Barkley, and now Conor Gallagher as well. So I think firstly, I'll just ask you quickly on Unai Emery's contract. 5 years. He's now the manager, not just the coach. He's here until 2029. All going well. So what do you make of Unai Emery's new contract?
Yeah, it's fantastic news. He's just galvanised the club, hasn't he? He's everything that we are excited about at this moment in time. Is just led through Unai Emery. He is a breath of fresh air. He's changed the club. Everything about him just has 100% belief. I don't think I've ever known the Villa fan base to be this committed to a manager. I even look back to the O'Neill days, was probably the last time we had such a influential manager. Obviously, Dean Smith instantly won over the fans with that Villa connection. But during the end of his tenure, we were all aware that we perhaps needed to move on, but we didn't want to emotionally let go.
Mm.
But yeah, under O'Neill, there was a little bit of discontent at times. I've never known it to be so good in terms of no toxicity in the Holt end, away ends. There's nothing toxic going on. Everything's brought in, and it's all because of Unai. So we just have to hope that the next 5 years is as good as the first 18 months or so, because if that's the case, I can't see us not winning a trophy at some point under Unai Emery, and that excites me more than anything. So yeah, it's just fantastic news, and also great timing, because as we'll discuss with some of these clubs, the real positive is moving early in the transfer window. And we have now made our biggest statement to any potential player. The main reason to join Aston Villa at the moment is because we're successful. The main reason we're successful is Unai Emery, and he is committed. There's been a lot of big jobs available. It looks like there's going to be some more big jobs coming available. Unai Emery has stated he has no intention to leave. So if you're a player umming and ahhing about who to join, and you want stability and you want a great manager, Aston Villa are providing everything you could possibly want as a player. So when we are going to be negotiating this summer, this is just huge. I can't see any reason why we aren't the most attractive team to be joining right now.
Yeah, completely. And the structures around him as well, Unai Emery as well. I was never worried at all that he was going to go to somewhere like a Bayern
Yeah.
Munich or Manchester United, despite kind of what various pundits were saying. So yeah, it's fantastic news. But we've also been linked to Ross Barkley. So I've been defending that move. I think it makes sense in the PSR environment, and I think he played very
Yeah.
well in a deep role for Luton last year. It would mean more minutes or fewer minutes needed for Louise, and beginning a season where we guaranteed 8 extra games anyway. So,
Yeah.
but what do you think in it?
It's a solid signing. I don't think anyone's going to get too overly excited about Ross Barkley coming back. It indicates that he had a good relationship with some of the players that are still there. I'm sure made sure he's not going to be any unrest in the dressing room. And he has got a lot of Premier League experience, and he'll be so excited. He seems to be a player that has this self-belief that he belongs on the biggest stage.
Yeah.
And I think when he broke through, his ability was backing that self-belief up. And he sort of failed for the last few years in terms of his own ambitions and his own expectations. But he does seem to be a player that should thrive being at a Champions League team. I
Mhm.
sort of think he wants the bigger the audience, the more better player that he will become. So it should be pretty cost neutral signing. It's not going to break our bank. And like you said, no, I think at the tail end of the season, I think we made a mistake in letting Dendonka go out on loan.
Yeah.
I think in hindsight. Obviously, we didn't know Kamara was going to be out for the season at any point. So that extra depth, and that's what it is. Frankly, it's a depth signing, isn't it?
Yep.
It's not going to improve the first 11 if everybody's fit. He doesn't get into the team, but it's a step up from what we've currently got on the bench. And he's sort of player that if he can show how good he is, then he can challenge for that first team. So I like you say, Frankie, it's not. I think it's a great signing in the sense of it's just dependable. It's what we need to improve the squad. Would I get overly excited about it? No, but I think it does add value to the squad, which I think is where we're at the moment.
Completely. And another player, of course, it was Miguel Delaney, who's been quite good on the old scoops with Aston Villa in recent years. I actually wonder if he's got a good connection to Monchi or something. But yeah, he's talked about Aston Villa are interested in Conor Gallagher. I personally would love that signing, but what do you think?
Yeah, I would. I think we touched on it. That midfield, that they played so many games, Louise and McGinn. It
Yeah, a
was
lot.
clearly the area that we were getting overrun towards the end of the season. Tielemans getting that injury in, was it the first leg against Olympiacos? He went off after 20 minutes. I think that was the game. Or he went off early in one of the games, and that just killed that momentum. He was looking like a real star player. So extra depth in that midfield is key. I actually think Gallagher could improve the 11. I don't know exactly if he's a like for like for McGinn, but I think he certainly pushes McGinn on qualities. I think McGinn perhaps has different attributes to Gallagher, but I think it's genuine competition for first team more so than Ross Barkley. I think Ross Barkley would be a genuine rotation signing, whereas I think Conor Gallagher could come in and actually improve the starting 11 or certainly challenge and keep Douglas Luiz and McGinn and Tielemans on their toes a little bit more. I felt Luiz at times perhaps took for granted he was going to play every week.
Yeah.
So I think it would be a great signing. Don't know how much it will cost us. Chelsea, as we'll touch upon in the prediction, are in such a financial awkwardness that they need to sell by the end of June. So why would a club come in and help them out? So it's going to be a strange, but as an actual player, you can't, like, if you think about Zaniola's going to have left, Donker's going to have left in that midfield. If you replace those two straight away with Ross Barkley and Conor Gallagher, that's a huge step up.
Yeah, it is.
Huge step up.
And it's also the versatility. That's what they've
Yeah.
got. Barkley, Conor Gallagher. Then you're looking at Tielemans, Louise, and McGinn. All of them can play in a variety of positions across
Yeah.
that sort of that middle four that we like to use, even as a second striker. And I think that, I think losing Kamara was a massive miss at the end of the season. I
Yeah.
don't think Villa were the same without him, and I sort of fear going into next season without a CDM. But at the same time, I sort of understand why maybe if we are tight on PSR, as the sort of media report seems to suggest, maybe getting versatile players who can play as that CDM as Gallagher has done, or as an attacking midfielder as Gallagher has done, as has McGinn.
Yeah.
Maybe that does actually make more sense and just wait for Kamara to come back rather than going 30 million on some bloke from Monaco.
Yeah.
And then he can only play one position and he gets injured in October anyway. And suddenly be like, oh, great, back to square one. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I sort of think it makes sense in my head, even though it's not ideal having an out and out, not having an out and out CDM. But yeah, I rate Gallagher very highly, and I think Emery would love working with him.
Yeah.
But that leads us nicely into looking at next season. The reason we're here, 24-25, it's a season in which Aston Villa will be in the Champions League. Can you believe it? Well, I have to ask you though, with that Champions League pressure, the 8 extra games, maybe even a playoff as well if we reach that stage, and then maybe knockouts. Look, where do you think Villa are going to finish next season?
So I think under Emery we're always going to be challenging at the right end of the table. I think there's a top 7 next season. I think we're in it. So I think we could be. I think it's going to be a very similar Premier League season in terms of where we finish to this season. So we'll be battling to finish 4th. I don't see us drastically improving in terms of a league position because, like you said, with that Champions League games going on, it will bring an extra challenge to us. It'll be a lot harder games than the Conference League. We've had a fantastic experience this season in Europe, so it has created experience for the players. So I think where Newcastle struggled last season is that they went straight into the Champions League, and a lot of their players had never played European football before. Whereas the majority of our squad, depending on who we sign, will have at least had that experience this season. So the 2 games a week traveling and then playing in the Premier League will not feel as new to them this coming season. So that is a benefit. But the games will be a lot harder than they were last season.
Yeah.
But I think that will have an effect on the league. I think our points tally will be lower than last season, or the last season now. But I still see us finishing in the top six. I think I predicted us to finish sixth last season, and that's where my head is taking us to again for next season. I think there's, six places where I think Villa will finish. I think we can go quite deep into. I think we will get through this magical new league that is the Champions League. We have to finish in the top 24 to get into the knockout phases, and I think we'll do that.
Hmm.
So that will take us into February time playing in Europe. And I think
Yeah.
that will just have an effect. So I think we saw it this season. So yeah, sixth place is where I think we will finish, but I'm incredibly excited about the season ahead.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like you. I have also gone with Villa in sixth. I think that it's going to be I mean, obviously the extra games and the quality of teams we'll be playing against will be a big challenge. If we can get a big enough squad together, if say a Gallagher and a Barkley turn up, maybe another couple of players, maybe there's some outgoings as well. And on top of that, we get the injured players back in Buendia and Mings. And if we can, touch would avoid the sort of drastic level of injuries we had last season. I'm hopeful that we can still keep up a kind of even a top four challenge. But
Yeah,
I wonder whether there's just a couple of teams next season who might make a bit of a comeback. And whilst we are having to compete in the Champions League, and therefore, teams like Newcastle don't have Europe, if they can keep Isak and Guimaraes, I think that surely should help
yeah,
them. And then, a team like United, who knows, maybe they'll get in Thomas Tuchel. So yeah, it's going to be a big challenge again. But Unai Emery's been there, done it,
yeah,
but it is a different format to how he would have done it before in the Champions League. But yeah, I'm gonna say Villa sixth,
yeah.
even though I underestimated what we'd do last season. But I think I just think with the volume of games, I'm gonna
Yeah, I completely agree with what you've said there. Probably not Man United as much as we'll come on to a bit later, but I see the teams between third and seventh being in sort of like a mini competition.
yeah.
And you've mentioned the majority of them there in Spurs, Newcastle. And I think that's who we're competing with this
Yeah.
season. So I can see us finish as high in third if everything were to go perfectly well. And I can see us finishing as low as seventh. So I think sixth is probably with that European edge, that's where I've put us finishing.
Yeah, sure thing. Just got to work our way to stop conceding as many goals as we conceded in the second half of the
Yeah,
season, which is definitely something we need to work on this summer. And the Kamara injury is
yeah.
looming large in my head. But anyway, yep. So six. So we're going to move on to the Premier League title winner. I don't think you'll repeat last year's prediction, but who
Yeah.
have you gone with this year?
I've gone with Arsenal. I think Arsenal were fantastic this season. But for Aston Villa, they win the league. Um, and I can't see any of their first teamers leaving. They've got a really young, excited squad. They're all fully behind Arteta. He's got some very unique characteristics as a manager, but it seems like the players have all bought into that, and they are a striker away from being the real deal.
Yeah.
I mean, they were so close this season, and as I said last season, I just assume Man City will eventually run out of steam. So I can't see they can't surely just win the league every season. But for me, mentioning it with Villa, I said, oh, there's those teams between third and seventh. For me, it's a top two. I can only see Arsenal or Man City winning the league. I think there's quite a big gulf because I think Liverpool are going to drop off, and I don't see anybody catching up with either of those two. So for me, it's a two-horse race from the get-go. And I just think Arsenal are going to buy a striker. Ivan Toney, maybe Solanke, maybe they've got somebody out in Europe that they're keeping an eye on. And I think that will be the difference.
Yeah.
So Arsenal is where I'm going to say the title will be ending this time next year.
I've gone with Arsenal as well.
No, I
I said
see.
it. So last season, I very confidently projected City to continue that form, and but I think Arsenal might be at the stage where Liverpool were when they won the Premier League. Liverpool had come close, and then they went toe to toe, and they'd figured out kind of how to keep up with City in that sort of late season run. City always go on where they just win from December onwards,
Yeah,
and it feels like this year Arsenal did that. Um, and would have done it, but for Aston Villa's amazing win there, in April. And on top of that, I think Arsenal had a really bad December. They lost 3 games, Fulham, West
Yeah.
Ham, and Villa. Um, I think they might have learned their lesson from that this season. So, I think, yeah, I'm going to go with Arsenal. Do it. I think they've knocked on the door long enough, and eventually they'll break through. And I think City, they'll be fantastic. They'll do what they always do. They'll get to December. They'll win all the time. But maybe this time Arsenal just get the number of points they need, and City just fall off 1, 2 points, and that'll be it. So yeah,
Yeah.
gone with Arsenal to do it. So all right, top four.
Yeah, so I've got, as we probably alluded to, we've got Man City in second. I just sort of feel like this is going to be a unique season for Man City. These charges will
Yeah,
come to a head one way or another. They
yeah,
can't just keep going on and on. They will close it out, whether they get any points deduction, any fine. This time next year, those 115 charges will have been put to bed one way or another, and
yeah,
that will impact the club, you would imagine, in some form or other. Pep is sort of flirting with not signing a new contract
yeah.
and stuff like that. It just feels like this is going to be a potential end of an era type moment for Man City.
I can see. Yeah, I can see that.
So I'm expecting off-field turmoil, which they haven't really ever had in this Pep reign. Like, or it has never influenced them on the field. They've got incredibly amount of lawyers that just protect the team incredibly well. So the media don't, even though they keep asking these questions, it never seems to affect the players. I just think in terms of the Premier League, I'm expecting Man City to have some sort of bump this season off the field, which impacts them on the field. But having said that, they'll probably only lose the league by 2 points and they'll get like
Yeah,
95 points. So we're not talking like a huge
yeah,
catastrophe. I also think Pep in it, let's say it is his last season, he'll want to give him the Champions League again. So I think that will become an even bigger focus. So I'm talking that Man City are going to have a bad season and probably win the Champions League. So they're not going to fall off the rails dramatically. I just think Arsenal will do them this year. So I've got Man City in second. And like I said, I think those two are going to have like a big points gap between the rest.
yeah,
And then I've got in terms of the who's fighting for the Champions League. So that third to seventh window, I've got Spurs, Newcastle, Liverpool, Villa, and Chelsea in my next 5 teams. And I
mhm,
think you can make a really strong argument for any of those teams finishing between third and seventh. I,
yeah.
however, have gone for Spurs finishing third.
Right.
I felt last season Ange putting together, he got a good foundation. The one caveat that I put against Spurs is he was genuinely pissed off with how the Spurs fans treated that Man City game. They had a chance
Yeah,
to get Champions League. Villa were faltering and were clearly not going to get any more points at Palace. We were done. We were spent, and it was in their hands. And for the Spurs fans to be so unambitious with their own needs to be Champions League and just
yeah,
so focus on Arsenal not winning the title really upset Ange.
yeah,
And that's what Spurs do. Their own fans seem to upset good managers. They pissed off Conte, Mourinho, and now Ange.
yeah,
But assuming that the summer, calms all that down, he's a very positive manager. He's got a player there. They're going to be in the Europa League. I actually think they could go a long way in the Europa League, perhaps even to the final. I think they'll go really long. So that maybe contradicts them doing well in the league because they didn't have that last season. But I actually think they were a really strong team. So I've got Spurs in third. And then assuming it's top four again, and there's none of this top five nonsense, which we were with the coefficients league, which we shan't get into now, Frankie. I don't know if that's going to come back again next season. But assume it's top four. I've actually got Newcastle to
okay,
finish fourth. Um, and like you alluded to it earlier in the call, I'm assuming that they don't have to have a mass exodus of players. I know they haven't got Europe this season, but the likes of Isaac, who came in to Newcastle to play in the Champions League, I feel like they'll give them a season to try and get back into it.
yeah,
Bruno wants to stay at Newcastle. He's loved up there and he loves it there. So unless they're forced to sell, these players don't seem to be the players that are going to knock on the door and hand in transfer requests. So my assumption is that the majority of the squad remains intact. And if that is the case, they will finish in the top four. They haven't got Europe. They'll be so focused on maybe a domestic trophy as well. It's something that they and Villa are absolutely desperate for. But I actually think without that European distraction, they will be really strong. this season. So assuming they don't have to do a mass sale, my top four is Arsenal, Man City, Spurs, and Newcastle.
Right. Okay. That's yeah, not too dissimilar to mine actually. So my obviously I've gone with Arsenal to win the league. I think if they get that backup striker and improvement on Nketiah, I think they can do it. City, I think as you mentioned, Guardiola it was like Klopp leaving this season. If Guardiola announces he's leaving, you don't really know how that impacts them. Third, now I have absolutely no idea what to expect from Chelsea. I had Chelsea surefire third when Pochettino was there, and I thought they were building the kind of momentum Aston Villa built when Unai Emery came in midway through the season, and
Yeah.
that carried on into the next season, and we ended up top four. I thought Chelsea were going to do exactly the same because I think they were finally starting to click. I thought they'd have probably made, a couple of sales this summer, but maybe one or two signings that might actually work. And instead, they've just gone and sacked Pochettino. So I have absolutely no idea what to expect now from Chelsea. But it could go absolutely horribly wrong with Maresca, and he could be sacked by October. But I'm going to say that I think Pochettino's laid the foundations there, and that a coach who comes in and just works with the kind of the squad, the sort of belief that Pochettino's built. I'm going to say that it actually comes good, and that Malo Gusto and even Cucurella work very well as fullbacks for him next season. So yeah, Jackson started finding his feet. Kind of Cole Palmer is Cole Palmer. So yeah, I'm going to say that they actually come third next season, Chelsea. With the caveat that who knows how it goes in Maresca. And then fourth, have gone same as you, so Newcastle. I don't think they're going to sell Isak, and I think Isak's going to get them 20 goals again next season. No European football, which I think this season, with their injury crisis, probably played a part in that. I think next season maybe they won't have as many injuries. I don't really like watching Newcastle. I think they're flat track bully FC. I think they're a big physical team that on a Sunday, when you used to play football as a kid on Sunday League, you'd turn up when you were 13 and there'd be a bunch of lads who looked like they were 18. That's kind of what Newcastle are. I don't think they're a particularly brilliant football team. I think they do just bully teams, really. And I think that has limitations. But if they keep Guimaraes and he doesn't go to Arsenal, as is rumoured, and they keep Isak as well, I see no reason why they can't flat track bully their way to fourth again. So yeah, I think I think I'm going to say Newcastle fourth,
Yeah.
which it pains me to say because I wish I was predicting Villa, but maybe not this time. But right, so that's top four. Europa League, two places, fifth and sixth. Who have you gone for?
Yeah, so obviously I've got Villa in sixth, which you mentioned earlier. I've gone for Liverpool fifth, so I do think Liverpool are going to have. I think they're trying to replace Klopp. I have never seen a manager leave and this emotion come out before. I don't think when Sir Alex left, Man United fans were this emotional about it. I think they were a bit more level-headed. I think it's been a bit stupid, to be quite honest. Now, I know he's been exceptional while he's been there, and he seems like a really nice guy, but it has been a bit. Like, the media's just been a little bit over the top for me. I listened to Radio X and one of their DJs. It's like, oh, part of my life has ended. I'm like, come on. Maybe we'll feel like that in 10 years' time when Unai leaves us with all
Yeah.
this silverware in the back pocket. But I just think, and you saw the players crying on the pitch at the end of it. All I think to replace a man that was clearly loved up there and was an exceptional manager is going to be so hard. I don't know a great deal about Arnold Slot. He's obviously done well enough to. It was what they obviously wanted. Xavi Alonso, and they couldn't tease him away from Leverkusen. So they've gone for what seems like their second choice. One of the things I think is worth crediting Liverpool on, and something that should be probably credited Chelsea on, is they've acted fast. So their managers and West Ham, for this matter, their managers are going to get a full pre-season. So whatever their style is, whatever they need to do, is they're going to get a whole pre-season. They're going to work it out. So they should start the season ready to go. Which is why we'll come on to Man United, where I think they're going to struggle because they haven't been proactive. But I can't see Liverpool doing as well in the first season without Klopp. It's not trying to be negative towards their new manager. I just think that first season after a legacy manager, Ferguson, Wenger, all these that's their first season after these huge characters, they will struggle.
Yeah.
there were points last season, literal points in games. That was one because of the Klopp's energy.
Yeah.
They play for Klopp. And like he just galvanised everything about Liverpool. And some of their late goals were all because Klopp installed that into them. And I think some of that playing to the 99th minute sort of mentality might not instantly be there. I think there'll be games where they're not, and it just won't be as cutthroat, and that will see them have less points next season.
Yeah.
Similar to what I said with Man City, these teams aren't going to drop off and become in a relegation scrap or anything daft like that. But I do think Liverpool won't finish in the top four. He may, something that Mourinho always did was target the League Cup when he first joined the club, just get a silverware under his belt, get the fans on side. So I could see them winning a domestic trophy. I just don't think consistently over the season they'll be good enough to finish in that top four, but they're still going to be a very good team. And this is all on the assumption that Salah stays. I
Mm.
don't know if the Saudi money tempts him away, that's such a big, big player to replace. Probably irreplaceable, in truth, similar to when we had to took a couple of seasons and a couple of players to replace Grealish. I could see
Yeah.
Salah being that hard to replace. Yes, they've got Curtis Jones and Harvey Elliott already embedded into the squad, but he is exceptional.
Yeah.
So, assuming Salah stays, I have him in the top five. If Salah leaves, I can see him finishing even lower than that. But fifth place, I'll go for Liverpool.
Okay. So fifth place, Liverpool, then Aston Villa sixth. Mine,
Mm.
I've gone with United to come fifth. They are rubbish generally. They won the FA Cup. I have no idea what's going to happen with Ten Hag. Right now, last week it looked like he was guaranteed to go. Now, days later, he's still there. I think Ineos are just full of it. I think it's just performative rubbish, kind of like a bad middle manager coming in and saying, the most obvious things. Yeah, I don't think Ineos are going to make a massive difference to them. Though they'll obviously be better than the Glazers, who are just the worst owners maybe you can think of. Well, there's a few worse, but they're certainly not the best. But yeah, I've gone with United just because I do wonder if they're gonna. I'm going to go on the assumption that they do get rid of Ten Hag and they bring in Thomas Tuchel, and I'm going to say that Tuchel sorts them out. They make a couple of signings this summer, let a few go, and maybe Tuchel just with his experience in the Premier League, his managerial ability, that he maybe just gets them up to fifth. So yeah, that's where I've put United. I think there's going to be a bigger drop off for Liverpool actually.
Yeah.
And we've both gone with Villa in sixth. So that puts us down to seventh in the Conference League place. Right?
Yeah, so I've gone for Chelsea, and
Yeah,
I've basically, when I was writing up my thoughts, I had the exact same thought of you. If Pochettino was still there, they'd be third.
yeah,
Uh, but and like I said, I've bracketed these two. So Spurs to Chelsea, I could see there's a strong argument for any of those teams I've just mentioned finishing in any of those positions. I don't see any of them finishing in the top two. And I personally don't see any of them finishing below seventh. Chelsea was the most unsettled of that bracket of five teams. So that's why I've alluded to or decided that they will finish seventh. Like I said, exactly the same as you. I think Poch built a framework. I can't understand why they got rid of him. The fans didn't want him in the first place because he was ex-Spurs. Then he won them over. Then he started winning games, and then you sack him. Like, they had so many opportunities to sack him when he was doing badly.
yeah.
They waited for him to do good and get everybody settled, and then it's just bonkers. And they want to sell Gallagher, as we've talked about, who is a homegrown hero, which we understand why from a financial perspective. So I just couldn't have enough faith in Chelsea getting it right. But they've been a basket club probably for the last 15 years, and they seem to every now and again get it absolutely bang on. So don't disagree with you entirely on them finishing third, but that's why I've got them in that bracket. But they were the most unsettled of those five teams, so that's why I've put them in seventh.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I've gone seventh place, Conference League, Liverpool, famous European nights at Anfield in the Conference League the season after. The reason for it, like you mentioned earlier, replacing Jurgen Klopp. He's like some managers just are such a personality. It is literally impossible to replace them. And I just wonder if a lot of those players were so used to Klopp, Trent, Robertson, and maybe even Salah goes, Darwin Núñez. Just a lot of these players are so used to Klopp. I wonder if they're sat there at half time in September 2-0 down at Fulham or somewhere, and Arne Slot just doesn't have the same personality as a Klopp in the dressing room. I just wonder how they react to that and how the transition sort of goes. And he's done well at Feyenoord. It's not exactly like I think Klopp when he came into Liverpool was a surefire thing. I don't feel like that was Slot. So I think it's a bit of an unknown quantity, and who knows, maybe he gets them playing a style of football that they click with immediately. But it just feels with Liverpool they need to sign a CDM. That's been a big problem for them this season. They had a lot of flaws this season that I think Klopp's personality helped them overcome, much like Ferguson did with United towards the end. And Salah now, not at his peak, he's probably past his peak. I just think that's a lot for Liverpool to overcome. And so I've actually got them, dropping down to 7th next season. So that's our top 7. We move on to relegation. We look at the bottom of the table where it all gets a bit feisty and fighty. Who have you got going down to bottom 3?
So, as I mentioned, I sort of split the league up into mini categories. So I had the top 2, and then I had the Champions League fight 3rd to 7th. And then I had teams that I see as 8th to safe. And then I had a bottom 6 of teams that I genuinely think could go down.
Yeah.
So the bottom 3 I have gone for, and bear in mind, I predicted this team to go down last season. So I feel like if you've got any Forest fans, they will never like me. Nor do I need to be liked in Nottingham. I only usually go there once a season. So I've gone for Forest to actually finish bottom. I just think there's so much going on with that club negatively in terms of will they get another points deduction, all this. And Nuno did an okay job, but Steve Cooper was a fan favourite there. Nuno has done enough, but hasn't really. I don't think the fans are that bothered about him. So if they have a poor start, easily turn on him. There's more uncertainty about Forest than I've ever experienced, or ever felt with that club. So for me, I can see them losing Gibbs White. I can easily see them losing Hudson Odoi.
Yeah.
And they're really hard to replace, especially if a team can't really spend that much money.
Yeah.
So my assumption is this summer they lose Gibbs White, they lose Hudson Odoi, and the players that they probably end up signing about 8 players to replace them, or against FFP because their owner's an absolute nut job, and then they get points deduction and they end up going down with like maybe like a random manager being brought back in. Maybe even Cooper gets brought back in at the end to try and save the day, and it isn't successful. I just think it's going to be a really stop and start season for Forest. So they're my first team to go down.
Yeah.
And then actually, I've only got. I think there was a big deal made of the fact that the 3 teams came up, went down. So I've actually only got 1 team going down that came up.
Right.
And this changed dramatically every day that I read which manager was staying and going.
Yeah. Same.
So because Ipswich manager has stayed, I've opted that keeps them up.
Yep.
And because Leicester have lost their manager, which I can't imagine they had been planning for, like
Yeah.
it really surprised me. I mean, I don't think it's actually been official yet, but it's all but done. He's going to Chelsea. I don't think he's actually signed yet, but it's almost happened. That is going to be really hard for them to sort out. They've also got an aging squad, but a lot of Premier League experience in that squad, which I felt would have kept them up. But there now might be a couple of players who will be speaking to their agents saying, hang on a second, I went up under this manager. I was thinking I was going to play under this manager. Is there any way you can get me a better Premier League club? So I think there could be a little bit of unrest. So I've gone with Leicester going down,
Leicester.
which a week ago I would never have said. But at the time of recording, because they've just lost their manager, I've got no idea they're going to bring in Ruud van Nistelrooy's 3rd favourite to get the job.
Yeah.
Which is so there's just so similar to, as I mentioned with Chelsea, that unrest. Leicester just feel like all their plans won the league quite early, or certainly would have been able to start planning for the Premier League. Everything that they've put in motion has just been tore up. So they need to act quickly, get a new manager in, and they could be absolutely fine. But no manager right at this moment in time. I think they're the most unsettled of the 3 promoted teams. So I've gone for Leicester to get relegated.
Sure thing.
The last team to get relegated is I've gone for Brentford.
Brentford. Right.
Yeah. I felt like they sort of have lost their spark a little bit. I think they were a media fan favourite for a while. You had Jamie Carragher and Neville down there on Friday night football or Saturday night football, whatever, and just joining in with the Hey Jude celebrations. Everything was brilliant. Thomas Frank's the greatest manager ever. Uh, and the media have published that story. They've done that story, and there's no other story to tell about Brentford. That is
Yeah.
the story, and they've sort of got tired of it. So without that excitement, I think that's led into the fans. I think the fans aren't that excited about the Premier League anymore. I remember it when Villa just trudged along in mid-table. It does get boring when you know you're
Mm.
not going to get to that top level and you're close to relegation. It's hard to get motivated as a fan base, and they rely heavily on music being pumped into that stadium. They're not the most vocal of fans anyway, so it's not an intimidating place to go really anymore.
Yeah.
Uh, Ivan Toney will surely leave this summer. They've got a hell of a good recruitment in the background, but I can see Frank being tempted to leave as well. They were on a terrible, terrible run at the end of last season. The momentum isn't there. I'm just struggling to see what spark is going to arrive at Brentford. It
Right.
feels like they need a new manager. It feels like they need a new striker to come in to lead the club forward. So that could happen, but it just feels like under Frank, they've become predictable. Like I feel
Yeah.
like opposite managers can find a way to beat Brentford. When they first came up, they were really unique. So I think they're going to really struggle next season. And I also think between now and the start of the next season, they're going to lose more players than they're going to sign.
Mm.
So I actually don't mind Brentford, got no issue with them, but unfortunately, I just think the fairy tale that Brentford in the Premier League, nobody really cares about it anymore. The media aren't bothered about it, and they will go down.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on Brentford in that. I think they're in a bit of a spell where, do you know, some teams threaten for a few years where they just kind of bobble along just above relegation zone and then they go.
Yeah.
Villa did it, Stoke did it, Swansea did it, Southampton did it. You know, there's just, and I feel like Brentford are in that zone,
Mm.
but I can see them going next year, but I think they actually, I've gone with them to just stay up just.
Yeah.
My bottom three are in bottom of the league. I've gone with Southampton. I a lot of questions about Russell Martin this season. I don't pay that much attention to Southampton, to be honest, but I did detect online a lot of doubts about him, and he proved that wrong by getting them up. And I think when I saw the playoff final against Leeds, they've conceded a lot of goals this season, but in that game they looked, I thought, defensively quite solid. And I think if they play more like that next season, they might be able to eke out a few more results, particularly at home. But I don't know. I look at the squad and going up to the playoffs, and not sure about Russell Martin's experience in the Premier League. I've actually gone with them to come bottom. But I am with you on Forest. I've gone with them to be second bottom, and I could also see them coming bottom. Forest. Yes, if they have to sell, if Morgan Gibbs White goes, is a huge, huge loss for them. And I think Espirito Santo, I don't think he really changed much at all. I don't think they did get much better. I think
Mm.
in attack they had players that actually could have done more damage to teams, and they didn't really do it on a consistent basis and only just stayed up, albeit with the points deduction. Who knows? Maybe they get another points deduction next season. God only knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've gone with Forest to be second bottom. I don't feel like the momentum's there, and losing Gibbs White would be huge for them if that happened. And then third bottom, I've gone with Leicester. And I think Leicester, because there's a lot of chat about another points deduction for them as well.
Who's there?
Yeah, financial problems before they went down last time. So I've gone with that in the back of my head. And also, as you say, losing Maresca right now. It depends, maybe they'll do what Bournemouth did and bring in like a charismatic coach or a sort of a forward-thinking coach like Iraola, who gets them playing a totally different style, and actually it really works for them. And if they pull that off, then they can stay up. But I just think with that lingering idea that financially there's problems at Leicester and they've just lost Maresca, I think it's a big ask at this very moment in time in late May for them to overcome that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've gone with that conservatively for two of the promoted teams to go down and Forest to just continue that downward trajectory
Yeah.
they're on. So that's my bottom three. First manager sacked.
Crikey, well, that could happen tomorrow. There's so many changes to go
Yeah.
go around. I think there's going to be so many moving around. It's So I don't know because there's Ten Hag is probably the obvious one in the net in terms of literally the next manager to sat from the time and recording it. I think there's going to be quite a few changes next season. Let's look at who's Arteta. You look at that top things. There's a lot of safe managers.
Yeah.
Um, so areas that I think from a managerial position that could become of interest. Does Gary O'Neill feel like he could get a better club? So if Man United lose Ten Hag, and I think let's talk about Man United because I think that is so intrinsic with the manager. So the question of the first manager to go, I think just feels like it is all about Man United. Your prediction is based on them getting rid of Ten Hag imminently and bringing in Thomas Tuchel, which I think is what they should do as a club. Because the reason I've put Man United in that bracket of eighth to safe is because I think they're going to keep Ten Hag
Right.
and the media are so against him and the reports, as soon as he has one or two bad results, it just turns toxic all over again. So
Right.
I can see them having to replace him in October. And that's when I talked about other clubs, West Ham, for example, who have been proactive. There's a lot of maybe feels like it was 100% the right time for Moyes to leave. Feels from the outside a bit of a bizarre decision to considering what they achieved, but actually everybody's in agreement that was the right decision. And they've given Laporte a whole preseason. So he's going to get the whole preseason and he's going to have his team ready. Similarly to Chelsea, they've obviously decided to change, but they've given their new manager a whole preseason. I don't think Man United are that forward thinking.
Right.
So, but if then Man United lose the manager in October, does Gary O'Neill put his name forward to it? And then do Wolves lose a manager? Who's going to take over at Brighton? The managerial thing is just so up in the air at this moment in time that I don't know who's going to be the next manager to go, but it feels like Man United are the centre of all managerial talk at this moment in time.
Yeah.
But in terms of a performance-based managerial to go, I think it goes back to Forest. I think once this is all settled, I think once the games start, I think Nuno's going to have a poor start, and I don't think his chairman has any patience at all. I think it
Yeah.
tested him a lot to keep Cooper in the role as long as he did. He likes to sack managers, so I think the Forest manager will be leaving relatively early into the new season.
Yeah. My first manager sacked, I had done a coin flip between Santo at Forest and Russell Martin at
Yeah.
Southampton. Like I say, if Southampton start with a flurry of bad results, I could see them just panicking and going, trying to find experience. Santo, like you, that chairman, if they start very slow, as you know, start as sort of poorly as they were, as they played generally under Santo anyway, I could I could see him as well. It's a coin flip, but I'm going to say the coin flips on the side of Russell Martin.
Yeah, the only thing it feels like last season was a really interesting one, wasn't it? Because Luton were terrible,
Yeah,
Burnley were terrible, but their chairman's or their board both realised that what they
yeah,
had was for the best of them. So I don't know if
that's
that would
true.
set a precedent. And also that must be financial, right? Because to replace a manager these days is so expensive. Southampton also seem like a sort of steady club, not that reactive. If you think when they got relegated, they kept changing their manager. They had that guy come in for a month from, what did it, was it? I forget his name now. He came from Luton, I think.
Hmm.
He was a Luton manager and he came in for a month and
Um,
basically slagged off everything
Nathan
about.
Jones.
Yeah, that's it. Slagged everything off about Southampton and then left with it. It basically did a Gerrard, but in a far shorter period. Um, so it feels like Southampton may learn a lesson. But I do, when I was writing my notes about Southampton, it felt like Russell Martin was the thing to be concerned about if I'm a Southampton fan.
Yeah,
Felt like he could be out of his depth. And also, with Southampton, there's just nothing intimidating about going to St Mary's. That 99% of the players would have played there. All the fans have been there before. It's a quite an unhostile atmosphere. So, when you said they were going down, they're the team I had 17th, and it was a coin flip between them. So, I think Southampton board will stick with Martin. But having said that, I don't know how loved he is by the fans. I think they went on like a quite a long and beaten run under him. Obviously, he's got up for the playoffs. Their fans aren't the most known for protesting or anything like that. So I imagine he the safest option will be keeping him in a job. Do I think he's going to be absolutely amazing? Probably not. But I think they will lead, like they'll be cautious as a board based on the last time they were in the Premier League. I think they had 4 managers and went down, so they'll learn from that lesson.
Okay. Yeah. So FA Cup, who's going to win it?
FA Cup, who's going to win that? So yes, I think Man City are going to get far in it. Chelsea usually do well in cup competition. It'd be lovely if one of those, if a Villa or a new team won it. Um, I think Arsenal are going to be so focused on the league. I can see them
I agree.
devaluing the
Yeah.
domestic trophies quite early on. So I don't think it will be Arsenal. Um, Spurs probably will never win a trophy, but it'd be lovely for a new team to win it. But sort of feel like Man City won't go trophyless this season, and I don't think they're going to win the league. So they'll win one of the two domestic trophies, Man City will. So I'll put them down as the FA Cup winners.
Okay. FA Cup winners, I've gone with Man City as well. I think they'll just have the squad and the firepower to do it. And I agree with you. I think Arsenal will be more focused on the Premier League. And yeah, maybe that'll be that. And City always hit a good run of form in the second half of the season. Carabao Cup.
So I am absolutely adamant Villa will play kids in that tournament this
Right.
season. I
Yeah.
always think Villa could win that tournament because we've got a relatively good history, albeit now decades ago. Um, but I don't think that'll be Man City. I don't think that'll be Arsenal. I think that'll be a team like a Chelsea, Man United, or Liverpool. That sort of, a team that we've put down for more a Europa style, but usually find a way to win trophies. They'll get far in the tournament. I'm actually going to go for Newcastle to win the
Okay.
league. I think they've knocked on the door. Actually, they've had some good cup runs recently, and they are so desperate. And it would pain me to see them win it, but at the same time, it'd be quite nice to see somebody new lift the trophy. So I'm going to go Newcastle for the Carabao Cup.
Yeah, that does make sense. Again, given the fact they don't have Europe, there's not a lot they're playing for. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. But I'm going to say Man United do it. Just they focus on the trophies quite heavily next season, I
Yeah.
think. Champions League, right. Well, first we'll say who's going to win it, and then we'll have a little chat about how Aston Villa might do in it. So, Champions
Are
League,
they not? Are they not elite? Are they not linked to you?
I've already, I'd say we're going to waltz it 5-0 in the final against Barcelona. But yeah, Champions League winner, who are you going to say?
It's an interesting tournament because it's a completely new league format, which I've tried, bearing in mind Villa in it, I've tried to get my head around it, and it hasn't got there just yet. But it feels like there's two teams that are head and shoulders above the rest in Europe, and that's Man City and Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Um, Bayern Munich, there's usually about 5 teams that you would realistically argue could win it. The finals in Munich next season, but Bayern Munich as a club, I know they've disappointed their new manager, but it does feel like they're in a bit of a weird state. But Bayern Munich have failed to win the Bundesliga before, and it usually then galvanise them. So you sort of feel like there's a resurgence coming at Bayern Munich. The fact they got Vincent Company in is odd, considering what we saw last season. Uh, but so it doesn't strike me as the right appointment, but I don't pretend to know enough about German football to suggest that there was somebody better out there. But the final meeting in Munich will have a huge impact on Bayern Munich, so they'll be strong favourites. But it's going to be Real Madrid will be in the deep end, PSG will be in the deep end, as will Man City. PSG will win the trophy one day, but they've lost Mbappe. I'll go Man City. I think will win it again
Man
next.
City. Uh, I think that, yeah, obviously City can win it. I think Arsenal actually have got the sort of system in place now to win it as well. Like I say, I think they'll be more focused on the Premier League. I'm going to say Aston Villa. No, I'm going to go uh, Real Madrid. Could win it in a couple of days' time.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that Kylian Mbappe led Real Madrid um, get the job done. And
That's scary, isn't it? Considering how good they've just won the Liga, they're in the Champions League final, and they're now signing the best player in the planet. It's a bit
yeah,
doesn't
no,
feel that fair. It doesn't feel like they're under any financial fair play rules
no,
over there, does it?
no, and it feels and it feels like they all of them are young players as well. Bellingham,
Yeah.
Mbappe, Vinicius, Endrick coming in, Rodrigo. They've got Camavinga midfield, Tushimani. I mean, these are all young players. Like bloody
Yeah,
hell,
it's
like.
scary, isn't it?
But they're going to be taught a lesson if they visit Villa Park next season. So because quite amazingly, Real Madrid could be there. So how do you think Villa are going to do in the Champions League?
We're going to have some fun. And Real Madrid is the ultimate tie. I am desperate to see
Same,
Villa play at the Bernabeu.
same,
I
all the
never
time.
ever thought I'd get to see that. So that would be my dream tie because they are for me the number one team in world football. I think a Premier League team, we're a bit biased. We're used to Man United, so a lot of perhaps Spanish people would, Man United as the top. But for me, Real Madrid would be the ultimate. So we have to finish in the top 24 to get through into the knockout stages. I think if you look at the teams when it's all said and done, there's a strong argument for us being around the 20th team in
Yeah,
the tournament. So I don't think it's beyond the realm to get out of the league. So obviously there's going to be 32 teams. You play 8 games. I think we'll have enough to get into that playoff. I don't know if I think we'll be really close because if you finish 16th, you get a home leg second. If you finish 17th, you get an away leg. So I think we'll be really close to that bracket of 16th, 17th. So I think we'll get out the league. I certainly don't think we'll be getting the bye. And then you just never know. Knockout football's crazy. Like most people would have said that we would be Olympiacos on paper. But you're going to come up against teams that play European football season
all
in,
the
season
time.
out.
It's
And I think
so big.
Olympiacos just taught us a huge lesson on how to be clinical, how not to let the emotions drive you. And I felt that the way they approached the game in their stadium, I know they were 2 goals up, but they were so savvy and so they didn't let the emotions take over to them, even though they've never been that far in Europe before. Congratulations to them winning the trophy last night. Their fans were excellent when I was there in Athens. They were really respectful towards us at the end, and there was a few nice moments exchanged between fans, which I hadn't seen in other European games. So certainly fair play to them for going on and winning the trophy. But we're coming up against season pros, and when you're in a knockout game, we will be underdogs. I think in
Yeah.
every knockout game we get to, I sort of feel like we have enough to get through that first knockout game. So I think we'll finish somewhere between 14th and 20th in the league. And I think we'll then win I don't know, is that the last 32 games or whatever it is, the format? But then you'll come up against a team that finished first to eighth in a big marquee game. And I think that's when our season will be done in the Champions League. I think if it was just a 1 game knockout, you never know. But to beat a team like Real Madrid over 2 legs is so hard. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
or Man City or Arsenal coming up against these teams in the Champions League would be horrible. Like, just to play Man City over 2 legs would be so demoralising. You think that really how our European? But these are the teams you got to try and beat. And do we think we could beat Man City over 2 legs?
Uh,
Absolutely not. You might
it's,
we outclassed them at home last season and managed to get a 1-0 win, and that was an
yeah.
absolute dominant performance. So the best case scenario is you're going to take a 1 goal lead to the Etihad, where we've not won in what feels like about 30 years' time. Even when we're 2-0 up, we lose there. So those are the teams you're eventually going to have to play against, and I
Mm.
think we'll be found short at that stage. So yeah, I think gets the last 16, albeit I'm not 100% sure on my numbers there, but yeah, but basically we'll win 1 knockout game is where I think we'll get to.
Okay. I like that. I think we'll get through the 8 games as well. I think what will happen is we'll have a big win in the league. I think we'll beat a name,
Yeah,
maybe at Villa Park, and it'll be a moment of like, oh my God, we've just beaten, let's say Bayern Munich. Their squad, they should beat us, really, but a bit of uncertainty there. A few European teams, maybe not quite at the level they have been. But I don't know. I think we'll have a big win, like a kind of like a
yeah.
maybe like a Lille style win at home. And that said, I think we'll have an absolute battering as well. I think we'll probably go somewhere and maybe like a
Yeah, let's see.
Barcelona and that European experience, they'll just outplay us and we'll be like, right. And in thing is, it's our first Champions League season, well, European Cup season since the early 80s. I think the European experience this season obviously will have stood us in good stead. I think we'll be better for it next season, but it's just a different level next season.
Yeah,
I think we're we hopefully what we experience next season then stands us in good stead for the seasons to come.
Yeah.
You know, if Emery can continue to get us into Europa Leagues, Champions Leagues, that sort of thing. So, you know, it's the to me it's the first step in a long journey. It's not the peak. It's
No, and that's
the
what it
next
has to
chapter.
be. That's you're absolutely right. Look at Newcastle, for example. They would have been saying exactly the same things last season. No, yeah, as much as Newcastle fans have got a little bit of delusional every now and again about how massive their club is. Nobody was suggesting they could win the Champions League, but they would have expected it to lead to season after season in Europe. The
Yeah,
fact that they were singing about it after the final whistle was quite amusing. But that's where we have to get to. We have to be in Europe every season
yeah,
under Emery for us to, because as soon as players get a taste for this Champions League, that comes with a double-edged sword in that if we're not there the following season, the likes of Dougie Luiz will be saying to his agent, "Oh no, I'm a Champions League player now,"
yeah,
and stuff like that. So this is a fantastic moment. That's why I think right now we are as attractive as we're ever going to be. And this time next season, I don't think we'll be in the Champions League, and with that will bring a little bit of unrest in certain areas. But I do think we'll be in Europe, and like I say, I think we'll be far more competitive in the Europa League or the Conference League as years go on than we were last season.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Right, so that's pretty much all the predictions. But let's get your
Well,
final
I have got
rundown.
a question for you, Frankie.
Oh yeah.
Am I right to think we've done the top seven and you've not mentioned Spurs?
I was about to say, yeah, where do what complete round out the Premier League table? Well, the reason I put Spurs in eighth is because obviously we got Europe next season, Europa League, but I think something wasn't right there with Ange at the end of the season. Some of the comments he was making sounded like Conte and Mourinho previously, and I wonder what is going on with what is it with Levy? Is it a Levy thing? Is it a club mentality thing? Is there something about dealing with Levy in person that just leaves you as a coach feeling a bit demoralized and frustrated?
Mm,
There's just something. There was something about the way Andrew's talking, not just even after the Man City game where the crowd were bizarrely quiet, but also just leading up to it. There were other comments he was making that to me sounded a bit like, like one comment I think I remember was something about needing new players, which I think is always like you veered into the
yeah,
Gerrard territory there. Um, I think he's a very good coach, but also one thing I observed with Spurs constantly this season, they remind me too much of Newcastle's Kevin Keegan's Newcastle, the
yeah,
entertainers. They're fantastic to watch, but bloody hell, they're so vulnerable. You
yeah.
know, Villa and Tottenham play a very high line, but I just felt with Villa, we were better at pulling it off with the offside trap. I kind of felt that um, Spurs, every single time I watched them, I thought this team's going to get through. Team's going to get through, and more often than not, they
Mhm.
did with a very get past their midfield press, one ball in like Burnley did towards the end of the season, and it's a goal. And I just think that is just. I just think teams are going to have it be prepared for that next season, and I don't know. I mean, obviously it could go very very differently, and they could finish much higher. I do rate Ange as a coach, and they have some fantastic players. I think they have a really good squad, Spurs.
Mm,
But I don't know, just something about that place just seems to get to coaches, and I wonder
yeah,
if it's starting to get to Ange a bit. Um, and yeah, so I've actually gone for them in eighth,
yeah.
which is lower than I would have expected, but yeah. So yeah, what have you gone for then? Eighth to 17th, basically. What's your order?
Yeah, so I think teams that are worth chatting about. So I think if we start near the bottom, I think the bottom six in terms of any of these six clubs could go down. Obviously, I had Southampton finishing 17th, and then I think Ipswich and Fulham at the bottom six.
Yeah.
So I think Ipswich, it feels like their manager signing a new contract is huge. Portman Road is a I don't know what to expect about Portman. So I've been there multiple times when we played them in the championship, and naturally they weren't a sellout. They were at that time the longest serving championship team. They were
Right.
never going to go up, and they needed to go down. And to go down and then bounce back up twice is really remarkable. So they'll have huge amount of momentum. From a Villa perspective, hope we don't play them in the first few weeks of the season. They
Yeah,
sort of
God.
want them to get that excitement out of the way. and then go there sort of January time where it's all a bit of doom and gloomy and we can just sneak a win and get out of it. But I don't know how hostile Portman Road's going to be. Like I say, it's really welcoming when I was in the Championship. I don't know how they'll be when it's a sellout. I've never experienced it. But I think they'll be the most excited of the teams to come up. It's been so long since they've been in the Premier League. There'll be a whole generation of fans never experienced it. So I think that adds a few extra points to their tally. And then I think Fulham could really struggle. They're the only team. I think I sort of feel like they've been plodding for far too long. They're sort of messing around with their stadium. They're not really inputting too much cash. I think when you talk about managers to leave, so is it Silver at Fulham? Been
Mm.
there a while. Had a really good reputation beforehand. Woody, obviously, he's been out of a clubs. Don't know. I can see Fulham just. I just don't know where they are as a club. Don't really see them being very ambitious. I mean, when you talked about Brentford getting into that lull of flirting with relegation, they seem to be at the start of that journey. Whereas I don't think they'll go down. I can see the next 2, 3 seasons being in that bottom six, and just I don't see what they're going to do to improve. So
Yeah.
they're the 16s that I think could go down.
Yep.
And then you've got that middle of the rung team. And I've got Man United as eighth. I just think they're going to keep Ten Hag. They're going to get rid of him and they're just not forward planning. I don't. What they everything that's good about Brighton, for example, is everything that's bad about Man United.
Yeah.
They just don't seem to have a plan in place. But I still think they'll finish eighth, similar to this season. And then you've got that mid-range team, which all of these teams could finish above each other. Some of them could sneak into the top seventh, but I think they'll be safe. I actually think Everton could finish as high as ninth. I've got Everton as ninth. I think Sean Dyche is a dramatically underrated manager just because he doesn't do things the way that Beautiful Game suggests, and the way he speaks isn't very exciting. And he's got a proper northern accent, and all this sort of stuff isn't very glamorous. He gets the best out of players. Um, but he gets them playing in a certain way. It might not be the most appealing on the eye, but he gets results and he gets them ticking. Last season at Goodison Park, their fans, when they can be bothered and when they're not protesting against the Premier League, are absolutely fantastic.
Mm.
So hopefully they'll stop protesting and just get behind their club this season, because that place last season at Goodison, I can't wait to visit. It is probably my favourite away ground to go to because of how unique it is, and it's a proper footballing city. Liverpool, and you just get that sense that everybody there loves football. They hate each other, but there's just you enter that city and it's football.
Yeah.
So I think Everton are going to have a really good season this year. They could go quite far in the League Cup. And I can see them flirting with European football. So I've got them as high as ninth. And then I've got a bunch of teams: West Ham, Palace, Brighton, Bournemouth, and Wolves, which I can't really make a strong argument for them finishing above each other. But I've gone West Ham to finish 10th. I think their new manager is a good signing. They've got a whole pre-season. Don't think they're going to lose too many players, but then I did write down, could Bowen go to Arsenal? Bowen signed a new contract in October, but we know the contracts are pretty worthless.
Newcastle
But
won
they
him there then.
feel like they've got a core of a team that are happy. I just don't think there's going to be too much unrest at West Ham, so I think they'll keep hold of Bowen, and therefore they'll be fine next season. But I don't think they'll be good enough to reach that extra level. Then I've got the team that I find most interesting to talk about are Palace,
Yeah.
because I think they've had a really good run at the worst possible time they could have done, because it's now put 4 players in the England squad. It's put every team is watching to see how they do at the Euros. I don't actually think all of them will go to the Euros. I think some of them won't make the final squad. Um, but I'm there thinking I'd quite like Villa to go shopping at Palace this
Yeah.
summer for 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 players. Liverpool, Man City, all these teams will be thinking the same. They've got so much attacking excitement. Anderson at the back is an exceptional player. Walton seems to have started the Premier League. So
Bayern Munich won Wharton apparently.
yeah, so I just think if you were to say Palace should finish in the top, could finish in the top 8, but the Palace team that ended the season will not be the Palace team that starts it. So I've put them in that middle bit because I think their starting 11 will be dramatically different to what it is right now. But
Yeah.
if it isn't, they could have a really, really good season next season. And then I've just got Brighton, Bournemouth, and Wolves. I don't think they'll go down. I don't think. I think Brighton probably didn't expect De Zerbi to leave in the manner that he did. They would have expected him to leave on their terms this
Yeah.
summer, but he sort of went a bit early. but they'll have a plan in place to bring some random person in who maybe Potter bring back, and they'll be fine as a club. But they're probably beginning to slide down the league over the next couple of years, but they won't be too dramatic. I think Bournemouth will be exactly like they were last season. Good for Bournemouth, but not really pressing. And then Wolves has probably got a good argument that they could finish higher, but there's a bit of an unrest at Wolves at the minute with higher season ticket prices have gone up by 20%. There's not a lot of
Yeah,
investment in the club. Gary O'Neill
PSR
fancy he can be at
issues.
a bigger club. So yeah, I've just they're the teams that are safe for me. And if you were to tell me that you could see Wolves finishing 10th, yeah, probably. But I've got them down at 14th.
Okay. Well, yeah, similar old muddle as mine is really in the race for 12th place. Basically, yeah, Spurs eighth. I'll go with Palace in ninth. I think you're right. I think a lot of those, not all those players who had them on that amazing run are going to be there at the start of next season. I have a feeling, but I think enough of them will be that they do continue that run. I think they might make a canny signing or two. The manager's clearly got them believing, got them playing something. And I think, yeah, I think they will continue that momentum into next season. So I actually do have them up in ninth. Everton in 10th. I think, like you, I think Dyche is solid enough. And I think he'll just, I think, are they getting into the new stadium next season?
Yeah.
They've got to be in there. So yeah. So maybe that just sort of helps them get a bit further up the table. Finally gets away from the relegation scrap they're in seemingly every single year. 11th, West Ham. Kudos, fantastic player. Bowen, who knows what's happening there? I think he'll stay. I think they'll probably be solid enough and get around there. 12th, Fulham again. I think just same old Fulham as it has been the last couple of years. I think Brighton are going to have a bit of a tail off next season. 13th. It looks like Graham Potter might his favourite for the job at the moment to come back. I don't know. It just feels like it's the glamour slightly off them at the moment. So I'm going with them in 13th. Bournemouth 14th. I think they'll be, solid enough team again next season. I think there was a lot to admire about them this year, but I think teams will be a bit better prepared for their intense press. Ipswich 15th. I think if McKenna had gone, I'd have had them maybe even bottom of the league, but he's staying. I think maybe that momentum will help them, and I think he'll probably, there's a danger of sort of looking at Burnley last season and thinking with company they might have actually, figured out a way of playing in the Premier League and come mid-table, and maybe Ipswich could do the same where that doesn't happen and they come bottom three. But I think they'll have enough. I think McKenna might just have enough to get them enough results. Brentford 16th. I think the tail off is there. Something's not quite happening for them at the moment. And Wolves in 17th. And I think if Neto goes, I think they're so reliant on Neto.
Yeah.
So reliant on him. They're not going to get a player who's as good as him. And it just feels a bit, again, like it wasn't a great end to the season for them. But like you say, I mean, if they finished in 10th, I could believe that as well.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to say 17th for Wolves because, it's Wolves. So yeah, that's the final rundown for the season. So, Webbo, we might as well have a quick look at what we said last season, just so that people can work out whether they should listen to us or not.
Yeah.
Um,
Shouldn't listen to me, that's for certain.
I tell you what, I think I did all right. I'm not as confident this season, but I think I did all right. But Webbo, we'll have a look at what you said last year. You went with title winner, Manchester United. Your justification was it'll be hard for Man City to find the motivation to follow up that treble. In fairness, they haven't repeated the treble.
Yeah.
They've only got the Premier League. But Man United, I think if you look at them last season, they actually, Ten Hag in his first season, after a disastrous start with a couple of big losses they had, they actually bounced back really well. They won the Carabao Cup, they got to an FA Cup final.
Yeah.
I think they finished third, I think it was.
Yeah.
So I can see your justification for it, but
I felt like they had to go out and buy Kane and or Rice. That was where my head was at. And with Man United, and you're obviously similar sort of era to me, they are the pinnacle. I can't help but because of the era I grew up in with Sir Alex Ferguson, they are I can't get my head around them not being this pinnacle football club. I think probably back in the 80s, if you were if that was your era, you'd still view Liverpool in the same mindset. It's very hard for me not to consider Man United this great football club. But everything you see, like with the stadium falling apart, they are clearly been run so poorly. But mentally, I just always consider them to be, and it's the fact that we've never really beaten them for season after season. So I still consider beating Man United a really massive feat because we still can't do it. I mean, they did the double over us last season, so they've got this They've warped my mind basically for life. So I'm quite relieved to have put them in eighth this season. So they'll probably win the league or something. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
predicted them to win the league last season was a huge error.
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you said Villa in seventh. You said three.
Happy to get that wrong.
Yeah, you said three decent cup runs. I think again at the time, I think that was a fair enough answer. We haven't been top seven for what 16 years at that point, so totally fair as I think. Top four, you went United to win it, City second, Liverpool third, Arsenal fourth. Europa League, you went Newcastle and Chelsea. Conference League, Aston Villa. Relegation, Forest, Bournemouth, Sheffield United. First manager sacked, Steve Cooper. It ended up being Paul Heckingbottom. Steve Cooper was literally, I think, days after that.
Yeah, that's not too bad.
FA Cup, you went with Arsenal. It ended up being Man United. Carabao Cup, you went with Man City. Ended up being Liverpool. Champions League, you went Real Madrid. They're in the
There we go.
final in this weekend. So
Might go and have a bet on Dortmund now then.
Yeah.
Everything else I've suggested.
And Conference League, you went with Aston Villa. Why not? It was Olympiacos. We got to semi-final. The place you got correct was Everton in 15.
So the only one.
Yeah. Although, what else did you get? You got Liverpool third as well. So fair enough there. So this was what I predicted. I went with Man City win the title. I just said they were too good. I thought Guardiola's so driven. He's proven it time and time again at different clubs that he just knows how to get it done. But I did think they'd go on and possibly even do a treble again. That didn't happen. I said Villa in sixth. I said they'd finish ahead of Chelsea and Spurs, but I did call it ambitious, which again shows our mentality at the time. You know, it was hard to believe that we'd make it through to a Champions League place. Top four, I went City first, Arsenal second, Liverpool third. Wow. Bloody hell. And I went United fourth. I went Europa League, Newcastle and Aston Villa. And I said Conference League, Chelsea. Hilariously, Chelsea have dropped into the Conference League because of... sort of by a technicality, I've kind of won that one.
That's impressive.
Relegation, I said Sheffield United would come bottom. I said Bournemouth would be second bottom and Luton third bottom. Luton were third bottom. First manager sacked, Paul Heckingbottom. He was the first manager sacked. I mean, bloody hell.
This is impressive.
This is really impressive. Right? FA Cup, I said Liverpool. It was United. Carabao Cup, City. It was Liverpool. Champions League, I said City. It was, or potentially is going to be Real Madrid or Dortmund. Conference League, I went Villa, why not? And it was Olympiacos. So my overall shouts ended up being pretty good, actually.
It sounds like I'd have to buy you an actual Nando's restaurant, let alone a beer.
Yeah.
That was a huge victory.
Yeah. I got quite a few places right as well. I said Sheffield United bottom, Luton third bottom, Forest fourth bottom. They were. Yeah. I said Fulham in 13th. That was correct. Otherwise, yeah, top three was right. So yeah,
well done, mate. Well done. I will happily buy you a Nando's in the coming weeks.
Yeah, although I've got to say I'm not anywhere near as confident with my predictions this season. I think there's a little bit more. There's more movement going on, isn't there? A little bit more unpredictability at this exact moment than there was last season. So it's hard. It's quite a bit harder to call this time, and the new Champions League format as well. How that impacts teams, we don't yet know. So that's my excuse making already for next season. But yes,
we have one last prediction from you as the predicting king, Frankie. Okay. Who's going to win the Euros then this summer?
France have the best team. Germany could have some momentum, but I don't think they're good enough.
England have flaws. Though, the Germans on home soil is so hard to not bet with them.
Yeah, and I wonder, do England have the mentality, the winning mentality yet built to beat Germany in a tournament? But I'm going to say they do. I'm going to say England do it.
Wow, and that's when your prediction king title fails.
It fails miserably. France the best team.
I'll go with the Germans on home soil. I think they'll just be too strong. They'll find a way. They always do.
All right, I'm going to make a note of that. Right, so you've gone Germany in Germany. Yeah. I've gone with England in Germany. That said, I think if England play Spain, I just feel like Spain are the type of team who play the type of football that England will not react well to in a tournament. And I could see Spain just 1-0ing their way to that. France have the best team. It should win it. But
I agree with France should win it. I agree with that.
But no, I'm going to say England.
Why not?
Maybe do it.
Why not? Let's
Might
be
maybe do it.
optimistic.
Jude Bellingham
Yeah.
builds himself a statue, and Foden in form, and Saka, and defensively there's weaknesses there, but I'm going to say they do it. So yeah,
I hope you're right, mate.
there we go. So yeah, I'm looking forward to my Nando's. Basically, I'm licking my lips.
Yeah, well earned, well earned.
Yeah, I'll be but I can't wait to see which franchise you buy me. So yeah, but Webber, as always, it's been great to have you on, and I'm sure I'll have you on again very soon this summer. A few more features maybe, and a few more discussions about potential signings. But Webber, thanks again for coming on.
Cheers, Frankie.